social entrepreneurship, even if you don't agree with it and you're more just for profit, making money, making bank, making checks, snapping necks, that sort of thing, that whole Wall Street thing, even if that's your sort of angle you're going at things, social business is still of interest to you. Because it's the most raw form of business. It's the original form of business where you have something that somebody else wants and something similar to a barter system, and you give it to them. Except for what you're exchanging with them is that you're accepting that your thing has more value. However, you have an abundance of it. You have, like say for example, a cheap cell phone that you know you can make, or that you believe you can make. You realize that that cell phone has enormous value to the person you're giving it to, right? But to you, it's pretty affordable, pretty doable, not that hard. So you're trading is something of great value that's easy for you. That is how most business started back in the day. That is how success has always worked. Through doing something for others that has meaning, because that you're not going to make much money in the short term if they don't care about it, right? And you don't care about it. You'll see this often, I don't want to get too critical, but in Japan, the way they develop products is they typically, or at least more traditionally, will make the product and then create the demand through media and advertising. Something like, oh, you didn't even know you ever needed this. And that works a small percentage of the time. But you gotta allow for enormous waste and failure, and also an economy that grows slowly. That is, of course, for much more than that reason. There's many other reasons for that, like a general adversity to spending and not saving. But at the end of the day, social business is about serving people's needs, and in a way that is a bit more genuine than a traditional business. Because you reinvest in the product. That is ideally what people would do, in a free market-based economy with no limitations on them. They would just try to make the best thing possible and give it to the most people, or as cheap as possible and get to as many people, depending on the need of the consumer. But a lot of companies, once they start making some sales, start skimping on the development of their product and the reinvention of it, adding on, improving it. That mentality is of social businesses and social entrepreneurship, of reinvesting the dividends and reinvesting the profit you make back into your services, is very compatible with a software and service-based economy. As software becomes a much bigger part of people's lives, even in the developing world, where it can make huge differences and strides in their ability to, make money, those values will succeed better in the 21st century because software needs that mentality of never-ending upgrades, of never-ending improvement. That is on a rapid scale, where like your shareholders aren't feeling like you're screwing them every other quarter. They still want, hey, this quarter it's all us. Give as much back as possible, and then a few you can sprinkle it out. No, every quarter, everything, every single profit is thinking about being reinvested beyond base salaries and some, basic stock of the company. Not all of them will have stocks. Some of them will be more like an LLC or a partnership, where there's a few partners, right, and they earn a certain percentage of the overall profits. And there's probably a better way of wording that, but the essential goal is that endless upgrades are essential in this day and age, and whatever company is able to keep up with that will probably be a social business. Why would they probably be a social business? Because there's no room for just mad profits where you pay your shareholders or your CEO some golden parachute bullshit, or you stock them up on salaries that they could never justify, some insane thing which could have gone back into a much better product next year. But instead you just put it into a couple people's salaries who like some sort of feudal caste system. Assume they have like a divine right of kings transferred to CEO, where they just inherit it because some unattainable, rare quality they have, rather than the fact that they were lucky and they're just at the top. That things could have gone sideways just as well, despite their intelligence or skill. And that a lot of this thing in a highly complex, fast-moving economy are a function of luck as well as a good idea. So you have to be more humble, you have to be willing to reinvest, and have to get away from this idea that endlessly increasing your salary is somehow good for a company. But it's not to say that traditional businesses don't have their pluses. Like a family restaurant doesn't necessarily need to be a huge democracy, or it doesn't need to be this massive high-tech thing where everything's upgrading all the time. Just focus on quality ingredients and getting the best ingredients you can do, and not necessarily paying yourself so much that you can't get good ingredients. It's much more obvious at that level of governance of a business. But when you talk about it on the larger scale, people start going, oh, no, we can skimp on ingredients, customers won't notice, and they say that every year, and they give themselves a bigger and bigger salary, and then all the customers notice. And they, despite their loyalty, despite how much they like whatever food you make, they slowly start finding other favorite restaurants. And then eventually you get to a point where you can't recover. And what these guys will do is they'll sell the restaurant, move on, and do it all over again at the next one, the new favorite. And what that is it's like a toxic form of business, like sort of vulture capitalism that ends up damaging things and damaging relationships, and it only relies on the fact that you belong to a class where you're immune from consequences, which is, again, not very realistic for normal people. I mean, you can get away with that if you're born into some hierarchy, but realistically, if you're trying to start a business, don't rely on some feudal system that's dying out to protect you. You need to be smarter and faster and nimble in this economy, this more globalized economy. Globalization always favors speed and innovation, at great cost, unfortunately, but nonetheless, it's marching that way ever more. And social businesses will have this huge period of time, this competitive advantage of the people at the top not pressuring them to give all the money for good ingredients and good food to the top. It's like having a less demanding chef who's a good cook but not a diva. That's what you're looking for with a social business. You're looking for people who have skill without massive ego at the top. That they put other people first in terms of their services, and guess what? They can end up making more money because the diva chef sometimes burns too many bridges. Doesn't matter how good you are, you burn too many bridges. And businesses are about relationships, especially when you're working in developing communities where it's all about relationship. It's not about contracts or lawyers. That won't save you there. Globalization is given often a bad rep, and for good reason. There's a lot of issues with it. There's a lot of harm that comes from the speed of change and also the nature of the change. However, globalization is also the reason for a lot of old prejudices dying. Sure, they're being replaced with new prejudices, but we are looking at larger and larger social groups over time. So if you go into a country, it's very likely now with technology, through globalization, the standardization of business services, banking, and the internet, that a young entrepreneur or somebody on a tight budget can be nimble, move into an economy, talk to the people, develop a product, work with a few of them, hire a few of them at a competitive wage because of the country's income. You can give them a great wage, it's still very affordable. If you're going from a developed country to a developing country. And at the same time, you can also mitigate some of your losses. So if you do fail, you're failing at a lower price point, at a lower investment, which is always important. So social businesses tend to thrive in places, not always, but they tend to thrive in developing countries or in markets that are neglected. And there are a lot of neglected places by globalization. So that harm it does, that is neglected, there needs to be a countervailing force. force pushing back, going into the neglected parts of the world and making money, making businesses, bringing jobs, and challenging these ideas that this is the way it has to be. Things can become globalized in a more equitable sense. And I don't mean that like everyone's gonna have the same go at it. I'm just saying we can make it less shitty.